firstly, congratulations on The Worst Person in the World. What has it been like seeing how audiences have collectively celebrated the film over the last 6 months?
It's been great, to be honest with you. It's especially after COVID, or during COVID rather. It was a very special moment where usually when I'm in post with the films that I've made, this being my fifth one, I usually show them to an audience of a few hundred people as test screenings, to sit there and during the editing to feel the humor or the emotional structure of it. And this time I wasn't able to. I was only allowed to show it to 5 people at once because I couldn't gather a crowd. You know, we weren't allowed to during COVID in the post-production. And then having it premiere at Cannes, where the first time I watched it in the audience is main competition, 2,300 people in a room. We were so nervous, and I was there with the actors and everything, but then it had a really warm, reception, and we were very moved by that. So I don't know, it's been quite marvelous, and I'm very happy. The film is shot on 35, and I want it to be a warm experience. It's a melancholic film, but it's also a lot about humor, and it's a romance. It's a romantic film. So to do that at this moment in time felt like I'm happy that this is the one I made at this moment.
Yeah. Well, speaking of 35 millimeter film, we're going to take it all the way back to the beginning, where I believe you actually first picked up the camera when you started making skate videos. What was about that time that kind of made you begin to fall in love with filmmaking?
To be honest, it started even earlier. My grandfather, Erik Löken, was a filmmaker, a director, and my father was a sound designer, my mom did a lot of documentaries, and then went into journalism after that. So I was around film sets and film people since my childhood. So even before I could write, I made like these stop motion things on Super 8. My father explained to me how to do it, and I was having Lego characters walk around, and I realized how slow and tedious, but also how satisfying it was when you got the Super 8 film back from the lab, and you could see, things that were suddenly moving, and you created a different world. And I've always been in love with watching movies, so I've always filmed, and making skate videos was really interesting because I was the Norwegian champion of skateboarding a couple of times. That was my life. I was really into skateboarding. It was a big passion of mine, and this thing to work also behind the camera, trying to capture moments of great tricks, people jumping down staircases, almost breaking their neck, like capturing unique moments and putting them together, really taught me that this is what I still try to do with actors. This idea that when Renate Reinsve in The Worst Person in the World, when she nails a scene, or she explores a scene, and something unique, emotional happens with her that she can replicate in the next take, those moments is what creates a movie. It's almost like a stunt, like a skateboard trick. You try to plan it, you have an idea, and you don't quite know how it's going to turn out until it actually happens, but you have it on film. So that sense of the event, the unique event, being at the essence of what I still do, I think is important. I mean, we do a lot of planning and everything, but I think for my actors, I try to let them explore something, to discover something they could never have done in rehearsal, something beyond that,
Yeah, because I think I read somewhere that after Thelma, you kind of wanted to kind of return back to basics a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think you said this amazing quote where you are looking for ineffective dialogue. You're kind of looking for that proximity between actors, which I really loved that quote because it kind of sums up the film so well. Is there kind of a secret to capturing that, or is it like a trust in the actors, or like how do you kind of build that in a film?
Thank you for that. No, that is the big question. I think, like how do we try to approach that ambition? In the writing room, there's this one note that Eskil and I put up on the wall way back that we just kept there, even though every project we take it down notes and put up pictures and everything to get inspired. But that note that keeps hanging there says, remember contrasts. And I think contrast is the essence of what I'm curious, like contrast in life, contrast in characters. It's very easy to get something very even, and you want it to be uneven and off. And I think my ideal for the worst person in the world, you're absolutely right. I have said this in the past, and I think it's true that I want to go back to the basics of representing types of characters that I feel that I would know from my life, not necessarily copying anyone in particular, but this almost creating a friend in all my characters, someone that I would be able to know intimately, or very, very closely, and to try to talk about bigger themes through everyday situations. In this one, with this film, it's about trying to find a partner, try to figure out love, try to figure out what you want to do with your work life. Very, very basic, but very big questions, but try to show them through characters that are relatable, that we can make truthful somehow. But it's always the dynamic between form and character. I want to be formally ambitious. I want to do scenes that are unreal too, like, or more stylized, like a mushroom sequence in this film, or at one point time freezes and Julie has this sort of romantic experience in a different universe almost. Like, and is it her imagination? Is it real? We don't quite know, but it's at least true to the character. It's how she perceives the world. And I think that's the baseline of this narrative, is to always find something close to Julie's perspective. That's the place where I want to explore things.
Well, and also, like, along with that too, because you just brought up that amazing sequence where time freezes, which is one of my favorite scenes in the film. But I also read somewhere that you love filming in Oslo because you know where light's going to hit particular streets, and you know when something's going to give a certain energy and vibe at a certain time of day. How much does that also kind of influence the story and making this film in particular?
No, absolutely. That's very relevant because I grew up in Oslo. So I can intuitively, when I'm in the room with Eskil Vogt writing, and we've worked together for so many years now, we can come up with ideas that are very specific. So, okay, so that part of that hill, there's a restaurant. Let's put that scene there, and then she can look out over the city down a hill, or, a romantic moment, the light coming up on in that park. Oh, Jesus, I've been there. I've done that. That's beautiful. Let's try to show that. Beauty is not to be underestimated. It's, when you say beauty today, people think of a perfume ad, but it doesn't have to be. Beauty can be something very, very, very powerful in a movie. And in a romantic movie, I want to lift the audience into this universe. And I grew up watching Fellini movies also, not only Bergman's stern eye on the human behavior. I like Hollywood movies, musicals. So I wanted to create that dynamic. And in Oslo, no one's done that really. It's not a city that's been filmed in a very romantic way usually. So that was interesting. I think that gives, as you say, at least as I'm a big film buff, and when I look back at movies, if I think of David Lynch, I don't always think about the story plot. I think about moods, moments, places more than anything.
Yeah. And that's what I kind of loved about the film, because it is kind of broken up into these 12 chapters. And they, just like kind of real life, they're all these kind of separate moments, but they all are kind of tied together into like a narrative. So how do you kind of craft this story with Eskil, who I believe you met when you were 18 as a camera basher on a game show, right?
You've done incredible research. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so that's true thing. One, I did meet Eskil when we were kind of kids working behind, like just as a job to make some money on game shows, live TV shows, entertainment, Saturday night. We would be behind the camera, and we would sit during the sort of evening. They called it lunch, but it was just like a quick evening meal before the show was going on, went on, and we would discuss movies. he was a film buff collecting VHSs just as I was, you know, like, oh, on Swedish TV, I recorded the Buñuel film. Oh, can I borrow that? I haven't seen this, you know, like just really being film nerds together and realizing after a while, you know, I knew I wanted to be a director, and Eskil was studying philosophy and literature at the time, and really also wanted to make movies, and we started collaborating, and he's now directed 2 feature films of his own, 2 marvelous films, Blind and The Innocents. And we were both this year at Cannes and playing in main selection with 1 film each, one that we'd collaborated on and I directed, and one that he wrote and directed himself. So he's very prolific and very so I don't know, we're film nerds that just went for the dream, and we're very grateful we were allowed to make movies. You also asked about the structure, didn't you, like the chapters?
Yeah, like how did that come to be?
Yeah, how, I mean, in a way, because we wanted so many different types of ideas. Again, this ideal of contrast in one movie. We started out early on just saying, well, we'll have chapters that'll allow us to change pace and form a bit throughout the movie. But we kept it. We could have removed it after a while. It could have just been a support wheel in a way. But actually, it made sense in this story that it gave it a more epic scope. We are looking at Julie in her moment by moment life, but we could also allow ourselves to, through the idea of chapters, to jump in time and move forward. And suddenly there's winter, there's summer again, a year passes, and the film becomes more epic, or it becomes about a bigger question of time moving through a young person's life from her late mid-20s to her early 30s. And the chapter kind of made a fair contract with the audience that this is going to be the structure. We're going to tell a bigger story. We can't talk about the film without talking about Renate's amazing performance. And you kind of touched on it a bit earlier. What was it like, kind of like, because the character Julie herself, she's so like naturally enigmatic in a really real way. How much was it of you informing the kind of performance, or kind of collaborating with her to kind of bring it to life? To talk about the collaboration of directors and actors is a very complex thing, because at some point I come with a lot of input. You know, I come with a script, ideas. I cast Renate. We wrote this one for her. We wanted her to be Julie from already writing stage. And we talk a lot and we prepare, but at some point she takes over the characters. And on set, she was so well prepared for the role that my job would become trying to inspire, keep reminding her of things about where she is in the storyline, giving her an opportunity to really push the scenes into unexpected directions. But she would do it. She's the doer. She's the performer. And I think it's clearly, it becomes her character, you know. That's kind of, you're handing it over to the actors. That's your job, I think, as a filmmaker or a director. It's hard to say something simple about it. I think it's about trust. I think it's about them letting go the control of the narrative. I take care of like what we need to bring home, but they can just try to run away with it. And that's the dialectic of it. That's always fun. Unexpected things will show up. We have this thing, I have a thing I call jazz takes. It's a term that Anders Danielsen Lee, who also plays in the film, and I came up with when we were doing Oslo August 31st, where since we want to try to create an event, we don't aim for perfection of dialogue. We try to do different versions. So after we kind of nailed the written version of it, we feel that we allow ourselves a couple of extra takes we call jazz takes, where it's free. It's not free improvisation, but we know what the chord structure is of the scene, and then they phrase it differently. Take a chance, come in backwards, try something else, kind of improvise a beat of it. Like maybe if there's a moment in the scene where they really felt they should be saying something else, I say, like, try that then, say that different thing, see what comes up. And very often those takes are quite exciting.
Yeah. Well, this kind of segues kind of into my last kind of run of questions, but this film also kind of wraps up the Oslo trilogy.
Yeah.
Have you thought about the kind of legacy these films will leave, and especially for Norwegian cinema? And also, I guess, if someone were to watch all 3 of these films, is there something you want them to take out of it specifically, or anything that overall?
I've been kind of, because it's now been called a trilogy, I've had to force myself to see also what thematic development I'm dealing with here. And when it comes to Anders's characters, we're dealing with people in reprise in their 20s with hopes and life ahead of them. And we're dealing with, in Oslo, August 31st, with the feeling of failure in your 30s. And maybe in this one, in terms of his character, sense of achievement and a sense of nostalgia and a sense of loss of time in your 40s, that certain things are past, you know. But the paradox of this one is also, through Julie's character, we're looking into the future. We're looking for someone who's actually coming into life and coming into an understanding of who they are. And, I feel that this is the most optimistic of all the three films in all. Most hopeful. So I think it's a good note to leave the Oslo trilogy on. That's kind of optimistic, yearning for something hopeful in the future. I won't say more. People will have to see the films, and maybe they'll make sense of why they connect together.
Well, I think it's also going to be a great film for audiences to check out this Boxing Day. And Australia finally gets to check it out.
I'm so happy. I'm so grateful that it's being distributed by a great distributor, and you know, I wish I could come to Australia and meet the audience, but hopefully next time, you know.
Hopefully next time. That would be great.